At an English bus stop, a spaniel stood sentinel over an unusual plastic bag, casting imploring gazes at every passerby. It wasn't until a curious man eventually paused to inspect the bag that he was left utterly astonished by its contents. Today, Carly was really focused on a plastic bag near her. She kept sniffing it, licking it, and acting like it was super important to her. The Cocker Spaniel felt like she had a big problem on her paws and that humans could help her. That's why she chose to stay at the bus stop. People were always coming and going there, and she believed someone would notice her and help her out. Carly sniffed the bag again and made a soft, whining noise. Cars were rushing by, and the two people at the bus stop hadn't paid attention to her yet. But Carly was determined to get help. She just had to find the right person for the job. Luckily, Paul Skinner, who worked as a city engineer in Lincolnshire, was getting ready for work. His dogs were excitedly playing around as he got his bicycle out of the shed for his 3-mile ride to work. About a mile into his journey, it started raining lightly, and the temperature dropped quickly, making the breeze feel cold. Back at the bus stop, Carly watched as people got on a bus. Once the bus left, she carefully picked up the plastic bag she had been guarding and pulled it under the shelter to protect it from the rain. She curled up around it to share her warmth, raised her head, and scanned for potential helpers. But there was no one in sight. Soon another bus arrived, and a bunch of people got off. Carly raised her head, not wanting to leave the bag cold and lonely, and let out a soft bark to get their attention. Sadly, not a single person even glanced her way. They'd all seemed lost in their own worlds, staring at the ground in front of them, oblivious to everything else. When they all walked away down the road, Carly let out a sigh and rested her head on the plastic bag. Her hope was fading, but luckily, her savior was about to make an entrance. Paul was now close to town. He had hopped onto the bus route as he did every morning and was beginning to enjoy his ride. It was raining, sure, but the air had a bracing quality, and his day lay ahead of him, promising to be a good one. His mood was buoyant, and he whistled an old jazz tune as he pedaled his bicycle. Carly sensed the cyclist approaching. In her doggy mind, she decided this was a do-or-die moment. She carefully uncurled herself from the plastic bag and slowly walked to the edge of the road. When the man on the bicycle came close, she started barking. At first, it was soft, but as he came closer and looked as if he was going to ride right past her, she barked louder and more incessantly. Paul noticed the spaniel at the bus shelter almost immediately. It was a beautiful animal, but a little worse for wear. The dog had clearly not been bathed for a while, and its fur was matted and knotty. When the spaniel started barking, Paul slowed down. He knew the sound of that specific bark very well. When his dogs barked like that, it meant they urgently needed his attention for something. So he came to a stop right next to the distressed animal. Speaking to her in a gentle voice, he dismounted and leaned his bicycle against the bus shelter. Paul went down onto his haunches and held out a hand. The dog's urgency was palpable, but she came over anyway. Cautiously, she stuck her nose out, smelled, and then licked his hands. In the dulcet tones only dogs and their owners understand, he started speaking to the dog, stroked her head, and asked her what she wanted to show him. As if she immediately understood, Carly turned around and went over to the plastic bag. Paul followed her. She was protective, almost trying to stay between him and the bag, even though she clearly needed help with whatever it contained. After calming down some more, Carly allowed Paul to touch the bag. The two carry handles were tied together, making it difficult to open. He sensed that it was part of the reason the dog was so upset. She couldn't get to the contents. On his haunches again, Paul struggled with the knot. It was tight, as if someone wanted to seal it completely. Another bus stopped at the shelter, but this time Carly ignored it. She had the attention of a human, and he was obviously going to help her. She ran around Paul and nosed at the bag in his hands. He could feel it contained a few lumpy objects, maybe the size of large potatoes. Resisting the urge to simply rip the bag apart, Paul refocused his attention on the knot. His fingernails were short, and the plastic was wet and slippery from the drizzle, but he finally managed to get a proper grip, and the knot came loose between his fingers. When he had loosened it completely, He parted the mouth of the bag until he could peek inside. But what he saw left him in shock. Carly dashed forward and stuck her nose into the bag. She whined and nosed about, then stuck her whole mouth into the bag and started licking something inside. Paul pushed her aside, gently pulled the mouth of the bag open wider, and stuck his hand inside. His fingers folded around something limp and furry. It was a newborn puppy. When he lifted the tiny bundle in front of his face, it was clear that the tiny dog was dead, or at the very least, on the verge of death. Not losing a moment, Paul fished in his pocket for his cell phone. He dialed the council number and got the contact details for the local animal shelter. Within a minute, a van from the shelter was on its way. While they waited, Paul tried to console Carly. He'd won her trust, and she allowed him to pull her closer. Paul was a little confused, though. The puppies in the plastic bag were not spaniels, which meant they didn't belong to her. So where had she found them, and why had she been keeping guard over them? 10 minutes later, the van that had responded to the animal distress call arrived at the bus shelter. 2 women emerged, and while they walked over from the vehicle, Paul started to explain. One of the women opened the plastic bag, reached inside, and removed 2 of the tiny bundles. She passed them over to her colleague and removed 2 more from the bag. After thoroughly examining the newborns, she slowly shook her head and looked up at her colleague. Unfortunately, the tiny puppies were dead. But who could have put the dead puppies into a plastic bag? Who would have tied the bag so tightly? And where had it been discarded before Carly picked it up? The tiny newborns were not hers. She found the bag somewhere, and her motherly instincts had kicked in. That's all Paul and the ladies from the animal shelter could figure. There was no one to prosecute for such a cruel crime, nor anyone to ask questions to. Now there was only one thing left for Paul to do. He made another call, but this time it was to his office. He told them he wouldn't be coming in today because he had more important things to take care of. 2 ladies from the animal shelter arrived with their van, and Paul loaded his bicycle inside. Afterward, he gently picked up Carly and placed her in the van as well. 20 minutes later, they arrived at Paul's home. "This is your new place," he told Carly. He gave her a gentle ear scratch and expressed his hope that she would feel comfortable behind the picket fence. Paul's own dogs were barking excitedly. They could sense a new dog nearby and were eager to make a new friend. Jumping ahead 3 months, Carly had become a cherished member of Paul's family. She had just become a mother to her own litter of puppies. Carly proved to be an amazing doggy mom, and she was living the kind of happy life that a sweet soul like her truly deserved. Would you have taken the time to check on the dog, and how would you have helped Carly? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please show your support by giving it a thumbs up and sharing it with your friends and family. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to stay updated with our channel. Thank you.